Welcome to another episode of the Ginger ROAMance. Here, you'll hear anonymous stories from travellers all over the world. Real submissions from real people. Tales of connection, romance, passion, heartbreak, friendship, and love in all its forms. Because every kind of love deserves to be told. This week's episode is called The Distance Between Tides, from Reykjavik, Iceland. I wasn't meant to be in Reykjavik for more than 4 days. It was a layover, really. A hinge between two larger decisions I hadn't yet made. Whether to go back to London and pretend my life fit me, or keep drifting east, collecting stamps in my passport, like distractions I could fold into stories later. I'd booked a modest room near the harbour, something with creaking floors and a kettle that took too long to boil. And I told myself I'd see a waterfall, eat something fermented, and leave. I remember the first time I saw her with an unreasonable clarity, as though my mind, even then, suspected it would need to archive the moment carefully. It was late afternoon, that strange Nordic hour where the light refuses to commit to evening. The sky was the colour of brushed aluminium, and the wind had teeth. I ducked into a cafe, more out of self-preservation than hunger. She was behind the counter, arguing softly with a man about cinnamon. Not about whether it belonged in coffee, that would have been ordinary, but about the ethics of sourcing it. You can't say you love flavour and ignore its origin, she said, her voice lilting but firm. That's like loving a story but refusing to hear where it comes from. The man laughed it off, paid, and left. She looked up then, and there was something in her expression, not quite apology, not quite defiance, that felt like an invitation. "Do you have strong opinions about cinnamon?" she asked me. "Only that I've never been asked to defend them before," I said. That made her smile, properly this time. It was the kind of smile that didn't perform. It arrived. She made me a coffee she insisted didn't need sugar, and for reasons I still can't fully explain, I stayed. Not in the cafe, I left eventually, but in the orbit of her. I came back the next morning, and the morning after that. By the third day, it felt less like coincidence and more like ritual. We talked about everything that doesn't usually make it into holiday conversations. Not the surface level itineraries, but the undercurrents. Why she stayed in a place where winter swallowed the sun. Why I couldn't seem to stay anywhere at all. "You move like you're being chased," she said once, wiping down the counter between customers. "Or like I'm chasing something," I replied. She shook her head gently. "No, chasing has direction." There was no flirtation at first, not in the obvious sense. It was more precise than that, like two people carefully testing the tensile strength of an invisible thread between them. On my last night, I told her I was leaving in the morning. "Of course you are," she said, as though I'd confirmed something she'd already decided was true. "I could stay," I offered, surprising myself. She studied me for a moment, and there was something almost tender in the way she declined. "No," she said. "Not like that. Not because of me. Not yet. Not yet." It was a dangerous phrase. It implied continuation. We walked along the harbour that night, the wind less hostile than usual, the water shifting like a restless animal. She told me about growing up in a town where everyone knew each other's histories, where leaving was considered both betrayal and inevitability. "And you?" she asked. "What do you come from?" I thought about it, about the careful neutrality of my upbringing, the way nothing had ever quite demanded me to stay. "Nowhere that insists," I said. She stopped walking then. "That's why you don't know how to," she said softly. We kissed once at the end of that walk. It wasn't cinematic. There were no fireworks, no swelling music, just the quiet, undeniable click of something aligning. The next morning, I left. Long distance is a peculiar kind of intimacy. It exists almost entirely in language, in messages, in late-night calls, in the spaces between words where meaning accumulates. It forces you to articulate things you might otherwise leave implied. At first it was easy, effortless even. We spoke every day, sometimes for hours. She would tell me about the changing light, about customers who lingered too long, about the way the sea looked when it was angry. I told her about cities that blurred together, about conversations that felt increasingly hollow, about the growing suspicion that I had mistaken movement for meaning. "You sound tired," she said once. "I think I am," I replied. "Then stop," she said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a challenge. Months passed. The novelty of distance gave way to something heavier, more demanding. Time zones became adversaries. There were calls missed not out of neglect, but out of misalignment. One of us asleep, the other waiting. We argued occasionally, not about anything catastrophic, but about the accumulation of small frustrations. "You're always somewhere else," she said once. Not angrily, but with a quiet resignation that unsettled me more. "That's the point," I replied, too quickly. There was a pause. "No," she said. "It isn't." We almost ended it then. Not dramatically. There was no final declaration, no slamming of metaphorical doors. Just a conversation that felt like it was slowly dissolving into absence. "Maybe this was just," I started. "A moment," she finished. "Yes." She was quiet for a long time. "I don't believe in moments," she said finally. "I believe in choices." "And what are you choosing?" I asked. "Not this," she said. "Not like this." We didn't speak for 2 weeks after that. They were, without exaggeration, the longest 2 weeks I've ever experienced. Not because of their duration, but because of their density. Every hour seemed to press against me, asking a question I did not want to answer. What was I actually doing? Drifting had always felt like freedom. No attachments, no expectations, just the open-ended promise of elsewhere. But in the absence of her voice, that freedom felt suspiciously like emptiness. I thought about Reykjavik constantly. About the cafe, the harbour, the way she looked at me as though I was something that could be understood if only I stopped moving long enough. So I did something I have never done before. I chose. I booked a one-way ticket back. She was at the cafe when I walked in, as though she had never left it. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her move, pouring coffee, speaking to a customer, existing in a way that felt both familiar and entirely new. When she saw me, She didn't react immediately. There was no gasp, no rush across the room, just a stillness, like the pause before a wave breaks. "You're back," she said. "I am." "For how long?" I took a breath. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm not leaving tomorrow." That seemed to matter. We didn't fall back into things instantly. There was a recalibration, a careful relearning of each other in the same physical space. Distance had allowed us to idealize. Proximity demanded accuracy. It wasn't always easy. I struggled, at first, with the idea of staying. Not just in Reykjavik, but in one life, with one person, in a way that required continuity. "You're restless again," she observed one evening. "I'm trying not to be," I replied. "That's not the same as choosing not to be," she said. She had a way of identifying the precise fault line in my thinking and pressing gently, but persistently, against it. So I stayed. Not perfectly, not without moments of doubt, but deliberately. I found work, something modest but sufficient. I learned the rhythms of the city, the way the light shifted, the way people moved through their days with a quiet resilience. And with her, it deepened. Not in the explosive way people often describe love, but in something steadier, more enduring. It became less about the intensity of feeling and more about the consistency of presence. We built something, not quickly, not without effort, but intentionally. Years later, I sometimes think about the version of myself who walked into that cafe for the first time. He believed he was passing through, that nothing needed to last in order to matter. I understand him. I even feel a certain tenderness towards him. But I also recognise how limited his understanding was. Because what I learned, what she taught me, without ever setting out to teach, is that staying is not the absence of movement. It's a different kind of journey entirely. One that requires you to confront yourself in ways that drifting never does. And one that asks you, again and again, to choose. And I do. Every day, in small, unremarkable ways, I choose her. I choose this life. I choose to remain. There's a moment I return to often. It's nothing significant on the surface. We're standing by the harbour again, years after that first night. The wind just as sharp, the water just as restless. She's talking about something, I don't even remember what, something ordinary. And I realise, with a kind of quiet certainty, that I am no longer wondering where I'll go next. Not because there's nowhere else to go, but because for the first time, I don't need there to be. I look at her and she catches me. "What?" she asks. "Nothing," I say. But it isn't nothing. It's everything I spent years searching for, disguised as something simple enough to almost miss. And for once, I don't.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you're following along to keep up to date with weekly stories that will inspire, entertain, and maybe even make you fall in love with the idea of love itself. Got your own romance story and want to be a part of the Ginger Romance community? Check the notes for details on how to submit your own.